In the mist-wreathed heights of Meteora, perched on towering cliffs that seemed to brush the sky, a single forge glowed through countless nights. It belonged to Kayla, a mortal blacksmith whose life was as unyielding as the iron she shaped. She had no throne, no courtly favors, only her forge, and the smell of molten metal. But beneath her hands, something extraordinary happened. Iron bent, and words fell silent in reverence. Sparks danced like living things whenever she struck her anvil, and those who witnessed her craft whispered that she didn't just shape metal, she spoke to it. It was under that very glow. One fateful night, that destiny stirred. The sky above Meteora rippled, not with thunder, but with a tremor in the air. From the forge's embers emerged a presence so quiet that the flames themselves seemed to hush. Not a god of Olympus, but Narration, the exiled god of the forge, whose essence lived in fire that had almost been forgotten. He was neither thunderous nor dramatic. He moved like simmering ash across the embers. He simply watched, and in that silence, the forge burned brighter still. Kayla's hammer fell with newfound intensity. Every strike chipped away at purpose and destiny, welding fate to steel. She did not look up, yet she felt him an echo of something beyond her craft, beyond mortality. And when she finally glanced his way, she saw not a divine face, but a quiet reflection of her own resolve. In that moment, two souls bound in unseen ritual, forging something neither metal nor mortal could withstand alone. 9 months later, at dawn's first blood-red light, Silas was born. He did not cry. His breath came out in smoky tendrils, curling around his small, pale body. His eyes were coals alive with a heat that had never known cold. The midwives crossed themselves. They felt its weight, heavy and unspoken. "He is not meant to stay here," one whispered. That whisper became a rumor, spreading like wildfire. The flame-born child, cursed and holy all at once. By 5, Silas could coax steel into shape with a glance. By 7, he forged a blade so flawless that it hummed with warmth long after it cooled. His silence spoke volumes better than any battle cry. He never laughed, but he wasn't joyless. He carried the quiet of a flame fed by breath alone. Villagers called him cursed, or worse, fire-touched. Children recoiled, elders averted their gaze. Yet Kayla stood proud and unbowed. Her son was not an omen. He was a promise. "Listen," she said to him one night as they stood before the forge. "Listen to the voice of the flames. They are not flames unless they speak." Silas closed his eyes, and the forge answered. It sang to him in crackles and pops, a language older than words. He listened. He learned. He absorbed. By 16, his reputation spanned kingdoms. Nobles in Bari sent envoys begging for weapons. Soldiers in Cordoba whispered of armor, born of legend. But Silas, he did not build for conquest. He built to listen, to understand. His soul was not bound to war. It pulsed with purpose, calling him toward something untamed beyond borders and crowns, something he felt in every ember of his being. And though he remained silent, the world around him, the heavens above, sang of his fate. There was a tremor at the base of Olympus. The gods stirred, uneasy as embers shaken. Somewhere in the dusk, temples felt colder. Priests lit candles that flickered and died before dawn. Fires died in hearths, dreams dimmed in starlight. A void was growing, and it demanded fuel. Silas sensed it too. The ember in his chest, born of divine blood and mortal hand, began to pulse with urgency. It was a fire that did not burn, it beckoned. It whispered of a world grown dim, of warmth receding from hearths, of hope slipping through chilled fingers. He packed nothing but his hammer, his mother's lullaby echoing in his heart. No armor, no companions, just his skill, his mystery, and a calm resolve as sharp as the blade he once shaped. With one last look at Kayla, with ash smudging her cheeks and tears in her eyes, He stepped away from the forge. The wind reached out to him, cold enough to steal breath, but he did not flinch. At the very edge of that high cliff, he paused, and in that moment, the entire world held its breath with him. What will come of the boy born of flame? Will he rekindle more than embers? Will the gods watch or rise? And if fire itself answers his call, will he stand as its master or its embodiment? If you want to see where Silas' journey leads and how the fire that almost died becomes the spark of a new future, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell. This story is far from over, and your presence keeps the forge burning. Before we dive deeper, I'd love to know what you think. Help me keep this content alive. Which trait do you think will be Silas' greatest weapon? A. His silence and patience. B. His unyielding sense of purpose. Comment below with A or B. Let's bring this legend back to life. It began not with thunder, but with silence. A silence so slow and subtle, it crept through the world unnoticed. Fires still burned at first. Hearths glowed softly, ovens warmed, torches flickered in their sconces. But if you listened closely, if you lived close to the heat, like blacksmiths or bakers or mothers waiting for broth to boil, you felt it. The fire no longer sang. Something had changed. In the kitchens of Florence, cooks stirred pots longer, confused as to why water refused to simmer. In the mountains of Anatolia, shepherds bundled thicker furs against a cold that felt unseasonal, unnatural. Across towns and cities, across coastlines and forests, the same quiet truth began to settle in. The world was losing warmth not just from the air, but from the soul. They called it a long winter. They blamed the stars. Some said the gods were angry again. Others said nothing at all, too afraid that saying it aloud would make it real. But the old ones remembered. The women who lit candles for their ancestors. The men who carved symbols above doorways. They remembered the first stories, the ones that came before scripture and stone. They remembered that fire had been a gift, and gifts could be taken back. Prometheus, once beloved and damned, had stolen the eternal flame from the heavens and delivered it to mankind, not just for survival, but for wonder. It was fire that had allowed men to create, to imagine, to rebel. Fire was art and invention. It was comfort and defiance. It was everything the gods had withheld until one of their own had said, "Let them burn." But over the centuries, humanity had grown forgetful. They no longer gathered around the fire to tell stories. They no longer spoke to it, listened to it, honored it. Fire became ordinary, expected, and slowly, as all neglected things do, it began to fade. Silas felt it in the forge before he ever saw it in the world. The heat he once shaped like breath now fought him. The steel that used to fold at his will resisted. Flames that once reached for his hands now receded. At first he thought he was tired. Then he thought perhaps the tools were dull. But deep down, something colder was stirring. He said nothing to Kayla, but she felt it too. She stopped humming at her work. Her fingers stayed longer, near the embers, after dark. Sometimes, she'd forget her tea on the coals, only to find it still cool hours later. The fire hadn't died. It had simply withdrawn, and in that quiet retreat, something old began to breathe again, across oceans. In marble temples with moss between the cracks, candles flickered out on their own. In Delphi, the oracle's torch would not stay lit. In forgotten sanctuaries, statues began to chill to the touch, their stone hearts remembering frost. Priests who once claimed to hear the gods now sat in silence, not because the gods were gone, but because the gods were waiting for someone to notice. High on Mount Olympus, where no mortal had climbed in generations, the divine brazier still burned, but just barely. The last remnant of Prometheus' gift sat shielded in marble in fear. It had not been used, not been touched. It was a light the gods kept only for themselves. locked away like memory too painful to confront. They had told themselves it was safer this way. Let mankind forget the fire. Let them return to the cold. Let them remember who held the power. But not all gods agreed, and not all embers die. In the quiet dark, Silas began to hear things, not with ears, but with something deeper. The forge would pop in strange rhythms. Sparks would dance in patterns. The flame, when it came, flickered in pulses like a heartbeat. He stopped sleeping, not from fear, but because the nights were no longer restful. They were full of something unsaid. He saw flashes in dreams, children curled near cold hearths, hands reaching for coals that gave no heat. He saw mothers crying into empty pots. He saw towns under starlight, too frozen to sing. And always, he saw the mountain. He had never been to Olympus. He wasn't even sure if it truly existed. But in his dreams, he walked its ridges. He felt its resistance, like stone that remembered blood. He saw the flames maul, defiant, caged. And somewhere inside him, the ember he was born with passed down from Keela's hands, and Nerian's divine sorrow began to respond. It was not rage. It was not revenge. It was need. The world was forgetting how to feel warm, and Silas could not allow that. Not when he knew what fire had once meant. Not when he could still feel it barely breathing beneath the surface of a silenced planet. So one night, he stood at the edge of Meteora's cliffs and faced the dark. He did not gather weapons. He carried no torch. The forge behind him was quiet. Kayla was asleep. He whispered a goodbye to no one. Then he turned his back on the cold and began walking. He didn't know if Olympus would let him near. He didn't know if the flame would accept him. He didn't even know if what he carried inside was enough to matter. But he walked anyway. Because even in silence, even in sorrow, even as the last fires died around him, his ember still burned. There are places in the world where silence is older than sound, where even the wind seems to forget how to speak. Delphi was one of them. Once a beacon of prophecy, a place where kings knelt and futures unfolded in smoke and song. It had fallen into stillness. Ivy strangled the columns. The sacred spring had turned to a trickle. Birds avoided it. Even the insects dared not hum. Silas arrived alone. He did not carry offerings. He did not announce himself. He walked past statues whose faces had been worn blank by time, past altars stained with forgotten rituals. The stones beneath his feet remembered footsteps, hundreds of them, some desperate, some arrogant, all seeking answers. And though none remained to greet him, he knew she was there. The oracle, her name was the Sara. She did not descend from lineage, not anymore. She did not wear gold, nor sit in chambers filled with incense. She sat alone in a cavern beneath the temple, where mist rose from cracks in the earth, and the air held the scent of stone and memory. She was draped in robes the color of smoke, and her hair fell like threads of moonlight over her blind eyes. But she was not powerless. She breathed in the moment Silas entered. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Her head tilted slightly, as if catching a scent the world had long forgotten. Her lips parted not in greeting, but in recognition. "You burn," she said quietly, "but not as fire burns. You burn like a question no one dares to answer." Silas took a step forward. The mist curled around him. "Closer," she said, her voice already a ceremony. "Let me see what the gods refuse to." He stood before her, and she reached out not with her hands, but with something deeper. Her breath faltered, her spine straightened. The air turned colder. "The ember inside you," she whispered. "It is not alone." She inhaled sharply, as if something invisible had passed through her. Then her body stiffened. Her eyes, though blind, flashed with the brightness of lightning buried in shadow. When she spoke again, her voice was not her own. "You will climb the mountain that does not welcome you. You will seek what was stolen. You will find the fire, and you will die." Silas didn't move. He didn't ask why. He didn't flinch. You were not made to carry peace, she continued. You were made to disturb it, to wake something old. The gods will know your name before they remember your face, and still, they will try to erase it. A tremor rippled through the cave. The flames along the wall dimmed, then swelled, though no one had lit them. The earth beneath their feet groaned softly, like something had stirred beneath centuries of sleep. The Sara's head fell forward. She gripped a stone chair as if it had turned molten beneath her. When she looked up again, her face was different, tired, yes, but clearer. Human, you shouldn't have come, she said softly. I didn't know I needed to, Silas replied. The Sara exhaled slowly. They buried the flame to protect it, but not from you, from themselves. She reached forward, blindly, and placed her hand against his chest. The ember inside him surged. She gasped. It's already begun, she murmured. You're becoming what they fear. He didn't understand what she meant. Not yet. But, he nodded. What do I do? He asked. She smiled, not kindly, but truthfully. You walk toward the mountain. You climb it. You take the flame. And you accept what must burn in return. Silas didn't thank her. There was no gratitude in prophecy, only clarity. He turned to leave, but just before he stepped beyond the cave, her voice reached him once more. You are not Prometheus, she said, her tone barely a whisper, but you will carry the same wound. He paused, only for a moment, and then he walked out into the dusk. Above him, Olympus loomed in the distance, its peak veiled in storm. But beneath his feet, the path had already begun to shift. The mountain was watching, and it had remembered his name. The path to Olympus did not begin with ascent, it began with descent. Not in metaphor, not in myth, but in the very real darkness of the earth. The cave beneath Mount Parnassus was not marked on any map. It was not whispered of in taverns or carved into temple walls. It was a place older than fear, forgotten not because it had been hidden, but because it demanded to be forgotten. Silas stood at its mouth for a long time. The wind that swirled around him wasn't cold in the way mountain winds were. It carried no scent, no sound. It didn't brush the skin. It moved through the spirit, as if the mountain itself was breathing him in, deciding whether or not to let him pass. He stepped forward. The darkness swallowed him without ceremony. There was no fire, yet somehow he saw. The walls glistened with a faint shimmer, not gold, not mineral, but something deeper, like memory trapped in stone. As he walked, the silence thickened. It wasn't empty. It was full, heavy with the weight of what had been said here, long ago. Prayers, pleas, regrets. Silas did not hurry. He passed. Bones. Hundreds of them. Some human, some not. None had been broken by violence. They were arranged neatly, like offerings laid down by hands that had once known reverence or surrender. Then came the breathing. It began as a low rhythm in the stone's low, thunderous, uneven, like a storm trying to dream. As he moved deeper, it grew more layered. 3 currents, 3 rhythms. Inhale, inhale, inhale. He stepped into the cavern. It opened like a cathedral carved into the underworld, and there, curled across a bed of ash and bone, lay Syrian. The beast was enormous, its form draped in fur, darker than any night Silas had seen. Its bodies were braided together, but its 3 heads moved independently. One slept, twitching as if dreaming. One stared, eyes closed but twitching beneath the lids. The third, it watched him. Silas felt no urge to fight. He knelt from the pouch at his side. He removed a single object, a collar, forged over 3 days, in silence, with only his mother's final ember to light the way. It was not made for war. It was made for memory, for recognition, for peace. He placed the collar before him, carved into it. In symbols older than any tongue were 3 words. One for each head: memory, loyalty, grief. He did not say them aloud, not yet. Instead, he began to hum. It was the lullaby Kayla used to sing when the nights were too quiet and the forge had gone cold. The song had no words. It didn't need them. It was not meant to be heard. It was meant to be remembered. The left head stirred first, eyes fluttering open, amber and unblinking. The right snarled, but did not rise. The center, the dreamer, lifted slowly. Its gaze landed on Silas. He kept humming. One by one, the heads leaned forward. He whispered the words now, just once. Softly. Memory, loyalty, grief. The center head closed its eyes and bowed. Silas stood, hands steady. He lifted the collar and placed it around the necks, one loop at a time. Each time he did, the air changed thicker, quieter, not like fear, but like reverence. The moment the last clasp locked into place, the ground behind Syrian cracked, not with violence, but with release. A doorway opened. Syrian exhaled. It did not speak. It did not growl. It simply stepped aside. Silas walked forward, through the gate of death, not with arrogance, but with understanding. He did not look back. The beast did not watch him go. Some say Syrian still lies there, beneath the mountain, but sleeps differently. Now, not as a guardian, but as a witness. Because for the first time in centuries, someone had come not to slay it, but to understand it. Not to conquer, but to honor. And in that act, the first gate of Olympus had opened, not to might, but to memory. There is a point in every climb where the world begins to thin, where air no longer fills the lungs fully, where time begins to stretch, and even thought feels distant, like a voice calling from underwater. For Silas, that point came after Syrian, after the darkness, after death had stepped aside. Olympus rose above him now, in jagged defiance, an ancient force carved in stone and silence, untouched by any mortal breath in centuries. There were no paths, no trails, only raw cliff face and wind that cut like glass. He climbed not with certainty, but with instinct. His hands bled, his muscles screamed. The ember in his chest, his only warmth, flickered unevenly now, as though questioning him. Still, he climbed on then, without warning. The wind stilled. It didn't die. It held its breath. Silas reached a ledge, just wide enough for one man to stand. The sky above was bruised with gray and gold. Clouds swirled like torn parchment. And there, on the edge, was a figure, Aeron. He did not announce himself. He simply was. Wearing a traveler's cloak, tattered and half open to reveal feet laced in winged sandals, Aaron looked nothing like the stories told. He was younger, older, all at once. His eyes were sharp, too sharpened. They gleamed not with kindness, but with warning. In his fingers, he spun a coin. It clicked softly with each rotation, like the ticking of a clock measuring something older than time. Silas said nothing. "Most don't make it this far," Aaron said, smiling as if they were old acquaintances. "They fall, or they forget what they're looking for, or worse, they remember who they were before they began." Silas stood his ground, his breath shallow, his heart steady. "You're not here to stop me," he said finally. "No," Aaron replied, tossing the coin in the air and catching it without looking. "I'm here to show you what it costs." A gust of wind curled around them, not wild, but precise, like a thread being drawn between worlds. The clouds parted slightly, revealing the vast drop below and the narrow spires ahead. The path grew sharper, more cruel. But it wasn't the mountain Silas feared. It was the truth he saw in Aaron's gaze. "You're not the first to seek the flame," the messenger said, his voice quiet now. "You won't be the last, but you are different." "How?" "You don't want to use it," Aaron replied. "You want to become it." Silas swallowed. "Is that not what's needed?" Aaron stepped closer. The coin vanished. His hands were now bare, and when he touched Silas' chest, just 2 fingers, the ember inside flared. not brighter, sharper. It hurt, Silas gasped. It wasn't a wound. It was exposure, as though every part of him, fear, love, memory, pain had been scraped open and lit. That, Aaron whispered, is what you carry. It will not protect you. It will devour you. Silas gritted his teeth, then let it. Aaron's eyes narrowed. For the first time, his voice lost its performance. The flame you seek was not meant for flesh. It is older than the gods, older than Olympus. It answers to no one, and when you touch it, it will burn away everything that isn't real. Good, Silas said, not with defiance, but with resolve. I don't want to carry anything false. The air between them shifted. The sky above cracked with distant thunder, not of storm, but of consequence. You think you're strong, Aaron said, but you're not Prometheus. I'm not trying to be, Silas answered. I'm trying to finish what he began. A silence followed. It wasn't heavy. It was hollow. The kind of quiet that comes when even fate isn't sure what happens. Next dot. Then Aaron smiled again. It wasn't mocking this time. It was sad. You're already burning, he said softly. You just haven't noticed. He stepped back, his form beginning to blur, to fade. May the mountain remember your name, he added, even if no one else does. And with that, he vanished. The ledge was empty. The wind returned, harsher now. The sky no longer held stillness. Olympus had seen, it had listened, and it had decided not to show mercy. Silas stood alone once more. The climb was not over. The worst was still ahead, but now he knew. The fire would not simply test his strength, it would test his truth. The summit of Olympus was not a place, it was an absence. No carved temples, no statues of gold, no thunder, no voice of the gods, just stillness and silence and light. Silas emerged from the last stretch of rock with bleeding hands and a body trembling under strain not only physical, but existential. Every step had stripped him of arrogance, of certainty, of the stories he thought he understood. What remained was not a hero, not a child of prophecy, just a boy with an ember in his chest, standing on stone, older than history. There, in the center of the summit, sat a brazier. It was unlike anything he had seen, not forged, not built. It looked as if it had grown from the stone itself, blackened, cracked, humming with an energy so subtle it could barely be called flame. But flame it was. A single white fire, neither hot nor cold, flickering without smoke. It did not reach for the sky. It bent inward, like it was watching itself, but it turned toward him. Silas felt it the moment he stepped forward. A pulse in his ribs, a resonance in his bones. The ember within him responded not by flaring, but by stilling, as if at last it had found something it recognized. The closer he came, the more the world faded. The wind no longer touched him. Time slowed, then fractured. He could feel it, the unraveling of all that tethered him to the world he had left below. The flame was not just fire. It was memory. It was judgment. It was awareness, and it saw him, not the way people saw through eyes, with expectation or fear, but truly saw, through time, through soul, through every layer of self he had ever tried to bury. It saw his childhood by the forge. It saw the night he woke with fire in his breath. It saw Kella's hands, and the way she never once treated him as less than whole. It saw the village that feared him, the silence he carried, the hunger that had no name, and it did not look away. He reached out. His hand did not shake, not because he was fearless, but because the fear had already passed through him. What remained now was something else, not of destiny, but of choice. When his fingers brushed the flame, it did not burn him. It entered him, not as pain, but as clarity. It poured through his skin like water through parched earth. His vision shattered, his breath caught, his knees buckled. He fell, not with collapse, but with release. The brazier behind him dimmed, then died, because the flame no longer lived in the bowl. It lived in him. His body changed, not in shape, but in meaning. Light crawled beneath his skin, threading through his veins like golden rivers. His spine arched, and his ribs glowed, each breath a forge. He tried to scream, but there was no sound. The transformation was not loud. It was inevitable. And then, silence again. He lay there, smoke curling from his hands. His clothes were scorched. His heartbeat had become something new, steady, luminous, deep. He was no longer Silas the Forgeborn, or the prophet's child, or the boy who sang to fire. He was the flame, not an imitation, not a vessel. The flame had chosen him. He rose slowly, each movement deliberate. The sky had shifted. It no longer roared with warning. It had gone still in reverence. Even Olympus, the mountain that did not bow, softened beneath his feet, not in submission, but in understanding, because the mountain knew what had happened, and so did he. He would not return as a man, not fully, and he would not descend to applause. There would be no parade, no divine proclamation. The gods would not shout his name, but the world below would feel him, in the warmth returning to hearts that had gone cold, in the breath of children who stopped shivering in their sleep, in the moment when night was no longer feared, because something inside it glowed. He had taken the flame, but not for himself, for everyone. The mountain no longer fought him. Where once the climb had been clawing and cruel, now the descent felt guided. The wind, once sharp, grew warm as it passed over Silas's skin. The stones, jagged and indifferent before, now shifted beneath, his feet not to hinder him, but to carry him down with quiet respect. Olympus had witnessed what it never expected. The flame had chosen a mortal, and that mortal had not taken it for power, or revenge, or glory. He had accepted it as burden, as purpose, as gift. Silas no longer walked the way he once had. He did not leave footprints in snow or soil. He left warmth. Where he stepped, frost cracked, not with violence, but with relief. Grass pushed through, frozen earth. Fires kindled themselves in doorways as he passed. People did not see him, not always, but they felt him. They felt the sudden hush of heat blooming in the corner of a room. The soft whisper of something invisible curling into the ashes of a long-dead hearth, and then flame, gentle, alive, present, in a crumbling village on the slopes of Thessaly. A child coughed herself to sleep beside an unlit fireplace. Her mother had given up asking the gods for help. But in the early hours, the girl stirred to find her blanket warm, and the hearth glowing gold. There had been no spark, no wood. Only a warmth that seemed to come from the very air in a chapel in Marseille, where candles had refused to stay lit for months. A priest knelt in frustration. His prayers had grown hoarse. His hands trembled with doubt. But when he looked up, every candle on the altar burned bright white and steady, flickering in perfect silence. He wept, not with faith, but with recognition. And in the mountains of Galicia, a blacksmith who hadn't lit her forge since the cold came, found it blazing. Before dawn, her tools glowed orange. Her hammer felt weightless in her hand. She struck once, and the metal rang like memory. No one knew his name, not yet, but they spoke of him, the traveler who never knocked, the warmth that passed like breath, the figure who shimmered at the edge of vision, never touching, only witnessing, only giving. He left no offerings, no sermons, no signs, but in every place he reached, something reawakened. Silas felt himself fading, not in body, but in boundary. He was not dying, he was dissolving. The flame within him had not burned him to a shit, had turned him into something other than flesh. His veins no longer carried blood, they carried light. His heartbeat had no echo. It pulsed in harmony with the fires he rekindled. He no longer slept. He no longer needed to, but the weight grew heavier. With every life he warmed, with every hearth. He returned to life, something inside him hollowed, not in pain, but in sacrifice. He was not empty. He was being filled by something that had no end. He could not return home. He understood that now. Kayla would not see him again, not as he had been. The forge in Meteora would glow again. Yes, she would feel it. She would know, but he would not pass through its doors. He would not lift her hammer. That part of him had been given away. He had not stolen the flame. He had become it. One final time, he came to rest on a hillside above a quiet town, where winter had overstayed its welcome. The streets below were dark, the homes silent. Families curled under blankets, waiting for spring that no longer came. He knelt, his hands resting on the earth, and exhaled not breath, but brilliance. The wind caught it. It carried him down through chimney smoke and cracked windows, into stoves and lanterns, and the dreams of those who had forgotten how to feel safe in the night. Light spread not in fire, but in spirit. When morning came, Silas was gone. No body, no flame, no trace, but the fires remained, and so did the warmth. Alina was forged in a place where love was not taught, only discipline. Sparta raised its daughters like it raised its sons, with blade in hand and silence in heart. From childhood, she learned that mercy was weakness, and longing was distraction. She trained alongside the fiercest, outmatched most, and earned the silent nods of warriors who rarely gave them. But even in a city built on conquest, Alina felt something missing. Not in the field, not on the training ground, but in the stillness that followed. When the night fell and no one was looking, she would remove her greaves and stare out toward the dark horizon, her heart too full and too empty all at once. One evening, after returning from a campaign in Thebes, she wandered beyond the city. Walls alone. The moon was high, casting silver on the trees, and the river Eurotas shimmered like a whisper just out of reach. Alina moved with no purpose, only with need. That was when she saw Ita Swan, standing still in a grove. No one ever entered it. It did not move as she approached. It watched her with unblinking eyes, as if it had been waiting. She did not speak to it that night, but she returned, once, then again, and again. She brought offerings, though she didn't know, why figs, pieces of carved wood, a torn piece of her old war banner. Each time, the swan remained. It never ate, never sang, but it listened, and Alina spoke. She spoke not of battles, but of loneliness, of honor that felt hollow, of the way silence hurt more than the blade. She spoke of the nights where the weight of strength felt like a cage, and as the seasons turned, her voice softened, her touch grew gentle. The warrior who had once never hesitated to strike now paused before stepping on a fallen leaf. The others noticed. She lost her edge, they said. Her command lessened. Her strikes grew slower, but Alina didn't care, because one night, as the autumn wind curled around her, the swan changed. It shimmered not with divine fire, but with sorrow. Feathers fell away, like regrets, and there he stood, a man, barely more than a breath, eyes full of grief and gold. Aurion. He did not speak, at first. He bowed his head, ashamed. He was once a god, he said, a quiet one. The god of harmony, of stillness between notes. He had tried, long ago, to calm Olympus from war, to stop the divine bloodshed. But in a world where strength was worshipped, peace was a threat. So they cursed him, turned him into a swan, doomed to watch, but never change, to listen, but never speak, until someone spoke not to him, but with him. Alina did not flee. She did not kneel. She stepped forward, heart breaking open, and said his name. It was a mistake, for to speak the true name of a cursed god was to break the spell and invoke its final clause. The swan had been a prison, but also protection. Now that it was broken, Time reclaimed its debt. Orion's body began to harden. Marble spread from his feet upward, inch by inch. He reached for her not in desperation, but in gratitude. He had been heard. That was enough. Alina took his hand. She stayed with him until the last. Breath left his lips, and stone replaced skin. When the warriors of Sparta noticed her absence, they searched. They found her camp abandoned, her weapons untouched. No tracks, no blood. She was never seen in Sparta again. But some say, if you wander beyond the Eurotas, on nights when the moon is full, you'll find a grove untouched by time, and in its center, a statue of a god, mid-reach, and a woman sitting beside him, her hand resting in his, her head bowed not in defeat, but in peace. No one lights fires there. They are not needed, because the love that once dared to listen still lingers in the air. Lior was born with music in his blood, but not the kind that echoed through halls or charmed crowds with rhyme and rhythm. His music was different, quieter, sadder, strange. He didn't learn it, he remembered it. From the moment he could speak, he sang melodies no one had ever heard, tunes that felt ancient and haunting, like they belonged to a world that no longer existed. People listened. At first, they were enchanted. In the marketplaces of Cordoba, in the temples of forgotten hills, he would stand and play, his voice a ribbon cutting through time. Strangers wept. Old men swore they saw their long-dead wives again when he sang. Children stilled. Even animals came close. But with every performance, Lior forgot a little more. The price of his gift was cruel. The music did not belong to him. It came from somewhere else, passed through him, like wind through leaves. And each time it left, it took something with it. He would wake not knowing the faces around him, forget the names of cities he had just played in. Once, he held a coin in his palm and could not remember what it was for. His own reflection grew foreign. The more beautiful the song, the more he lost. He sought help, of course, in Montserrat, in the silent monastery where monks carved prayers into stone. He begged for answers. The elder, a man who had not spoken in decades, broke his vow just once to whisper, "You carry a gift meant for gods, not men." Lior did not stop. He couldn't. The music kept coming. He traveled further, to smaller villages where no one knew his name. He played for the sick, the grieving, the forgotten, and they healed, not with medicine, but with memory. His songs unearthed what had been buried, lullabies from childhood, the sound of a lost sibling's laugh, the rhythm of home. But each note carved something from him. There came a night when he stood before a crowd and could not remember the instrument in his hands. He began to sing anyway. It was his greatest song. No one who heard it could describe it afterward. They tried using words like light, home, return. One old woman said it felt like waking up from the longest sleep. A child clung to her mother and cried, not from sadness, but from knowing too much. When the final note faded, Lior collapsed, not dead, not broken, empty. He opened his eyes to silence, not just around him, but within him. The music was gone. The memories were gone. His name was a sound he no longer recognized. He wandered for days before coming to rest near the ruins of an amphitheater at the edge of a quiet forest, and there he stayed. People still speak of him, a man who hums with no melody, who walks among trees like they're strangers he almost remembers. Some say he still plays, but only in dreams. Others believe the muses themselves cursed him. Punishment for stealing songs meant only for Olympus. But the truth is softer. Lior was not punished. He was chosen, not for glory, not for fame. He was chosen to carry something the world had forgotten. How to hold beauty that demanded sacrifice. He gave us songs that could not be recorded, only felt. Songs that lived only once and then vanished, taking a piece of him with them. Now, in the quiet places of the world, if you listen closely, just as you begin to fall asleep, You might hear it, a hum, a whisper, a memory you never lived, but miss all the same, and that is Lior, not a bard, a vessel. In the days and nights that followed the vanishing of Lior, the world seemed quieter, but not empty. Each story in this tapestry of flame, of silence, and of aching beauty had woven its own chord into the song of humanity. Looking back over the journeys of Silas, Alina, and Lior, we see more than mythology. We see the fragile facets of courage, sacrifice, love, and the enduring power of transformation. Silas the Flamebearer began as a lone hammer in Meteora's forge. Born of mortal hands and divine embers, he carried the weight of expectation and the burden of fire. His quest was never blood or glory, but something far deeper, to awaken warmth in a world chilled by neglect and fear. He descended into darkness to confront echoes of memory and grief. He faced wind and warning upon the mountain's ledge, and then he transformed, granting himself to the eternal flame, not as its master, but as its vessel. When he finally returned, he was not the boy with blood and bone, but the living embodiment of light. Wherever he wandered, the world thawed not by spectacle, but by quiet renewal. Homes rekindled, hearts thawed, and hope returned. His body dissolved, not in death, but in purpose, ensuring the spark persisted even after he was gone. Alina of Sparta was forged in discipline and solitude. She learned strength, obedience, and silence while living in a world that valued conquest over contemplation. Yet within her breast, a different melody began to stir, one unsung, unseen by the eyes of a warrior. A swan in a moonlit grove became her mirror, a being dignified not by steel, but by stillness. In time, she came to see grace in listening, and presence in patience. The swan revealed himself as Orion, a god trapped in silence. By speaking his name, Alina unleashed not only his voice, but her own freedom, a freedom that demanded sacrifice. She chose love over legacy, compassion over conquest. In embracing a bond unsanctioned by Sparta's code, she gave herself to the truth of her heart. Her story was not one of triumph in battle, but one of courage and devotion, and she bore the weight of her choice alone beside her beloved, forever intertwined in stone and memory. Lior, the bard, carried music like a wound. From birth, he was touched by a melody that outran time, older than mortal joy or sorrow. The muses themselves recognized him, and he was gifted with a song so pure, it could unravel hearts and heal wounds. But that gift came with a price. Each time he sang, fragments of himself, the people he met, the places he knew, even his own name fell away. In giving beauty, he lost identity. Fame was an illusion beside the truth he was unraveling. In the ruin of amphitheaters and the hush of forests, he remained, a mournful echo of divinity. He was not punished, he was chosen to trade self for legacy. His final note was not heard by many, but those who felt it carried its memory in their hearts. Lior did not vanish because he failed. He vanished because he succeeded too well. He shared a perfection that could not be contained in mortal skin. At their core, each story speaks to one timeless truth. Transformation demands sacrifice. Silas sacrificed body for purpose. Alina sacrificed legacy for love. Lior sacrificed memory for immortality. Each gave something essential, something most of us cling to every day. Silas let go of his life so warmth would continue. Alina let go of her status so her heart could remain true. Lior let go of his identity so beauty could touch us all. But there is another thread, subtler yet stronger, the idea of listening. Silas listened to flames, not to conquer them. Alina listened to solitude, not to silence it. Lior listened to the music of a world that no longer sang aloud. In silence, in stillness, in the deep valves of our hearts, what are we listening to? What fire are we prepared to carry, not for spectacle, but for renewal? In a world full of distractions, where noise is mistaken for significance, these stories invite us to pause, to breathe, to ask, What ember flickers quietly within me? What part of my soul longs to warm others, even at cost to itself? How we can apply these lessons today. Choose courage over comfort. Like Silas crossing the underworld, we face our own darkness, fear, doubt, uncertainty. Courage is not noise. It's the choice to keep moving forward when we no longer hear applause. Prioritize presence over power. Alina's story teaches us that sometimes the bravest act is to surrender control, to listen, to follow the heart's whisper. In relationships, in work, in leadership, presence has the power to transform more than declarations ever could. Embrace loss in service of beauty. Lior reminds us that creating, loving, living fully often demands we give up some part of ourselves. What are you willing to release to bring something enduring, kindness, art, memory into the world? Remember that change often comes softly. Our culture celebrates firestorms. It values noise. But true transformation, the kind that sticks, whispers, it reawakens us, not in booms, but in embers. To change personally or collectively, start by tending to your inner flame. Honor it, listen to it, dare to let it burn calmly. Surely, change fully, be the light, even when unseen. All three characters were remembered not for grand displays, but moments when they showed up silently and acted. You don't need recognition to matter. Sometimes the greatest impact is a gentle warmth passed between hands. Live in story, with intention. These ancient-sounding myths, with changed names, remind us that we are all characters in unfolding stories. What will yours say? Will you lead with humility, love, or passion, or fear, withdrawal, or destruction? The narrative is yours to shape. Choose wisely. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Which of these three characters resonated most deeply with your own journey? Silas, with his quest to rekindle warmth, Alina with her sacrifice for love, or Lior, with his devotion to art, at cost to self? Share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. Your perspective not only enriches our community, but helps illuminate these truths for others. If this story stirred something in you, whether it's hope, resolve, tenderness, or courage, please hit subscribe. Your support fuels more tales that delve beneath the surface. It empowers continued exploration into mythic echoes that speak truth to our everyday lives. Together, we'll keep this forge of ideas burning bright.